Hello there, ladies and gents. I am the Hypersonic55 and I'm going to give my review for One Piece, and this is my AMA audition for the Shunketsu XE crew. Firstly, I'll give a little information as to what One Piece is about and its origins. One Piece, like most anime, started out as a manga. The creator, Ichiro Oda, is the author and illustrator of One Piece, and because his manga was so successful, the animated adaptation was born in the shape of an OVA called One Piece Defeat the Pirate Ganzack. That was produced by Production IG in 1998. The year after, in 1999, the TV anime started airing on Fuji Television through the power of Toei Animation, the animation studio that gave Dragon Ball life. Since then, the series has had over 450 episodes. At this point in time, I think it's about 460, 10 movies, and 3 OVAs. Now, when it comes to story, One Piece follows the journey of Monkey D. Luffy, a boy who wants to become a pirate, gather a bunch of people to create a pirate crew, and search for the legendary treasure known as One Piece that the deceased king of the pirates, Gold D. Roger, left behind many years ago. Along the way, Luffy happens to acquire 8 other crew members with specific talents, tames a ship, and travels across the sea to many different locations, making friends and enemies along the way, and battling against pirate crews, the Marines, and the 7 warlords. Now, when it comes to the characters of One Piece, whether they be main cast, secondary cast, or characters that happen to show up for 1 or 2 episodes, each person happens to have their own personality and the style that they bring to the show. Luffy, as the main protagonist, is a happy-go-lucky kid, full of charisma and energy. He is also very naive and stupid, but also very strong, and has a very strong sense of justice. If this all sounds familiar, let's look back to who I call Luffy's predecessor, Son Goku from Dragon Ball. Now, obviously, there is many similarities that one can find, especially from the ones that I pointed out above, but they also have big appetites and don't move or fight well without food, among other things. Luffy's other comrades are Rona Zoro, the man known as the Pirate Hunter, that happens to use the 3-sword style of fighting, and happens to be Luffy's first crew member. Nami, who happens to be the ship's navigator, and also happens to be a thief, and loves money to the point where she probably would sacrifice her crew if she could have all the money in the world. Usopp is a cowardly fighter, but also a pretty good marksman and inventor. Sanji happens to be a cook and happens to fight mainly using his legs. Tony Chopper happens to be a reindeer who happens to be a very good doctor who happens to fight on occasion. Nico Robin happens to be the archaeologist of the crew. Frankie happens to be a cyborg who happens to be the shipwright of the crew. And Brooke happens to be a skeleton who happens to be the musician of the crew. Each character has a past full of hardship, suffering, and death in some cases, some more painful than others. And when these events of the characters' past come into present day in the series, you'll come to understand and really feel compassion for the people involved. Villains in the show are also interesting, come in all shapes and sizes, literally. All have different types of powers or weapons, stylish and wacky dress senses, and each present their own levels of villainy, whether they happen to be the main boss or subsidiary members. My favourites happen to be Captain Buggy, Hawkeye Mihawk, Admiral Aokiji, Bartholomew Kuma, and Rob Lucci, to name a few. The journey that you, as the viewer, go on as you watch One Piece is very emotive, as you feel the moments of anger, sadness, or other melancholy feelings, but the show is also very happy and joyous, and gives you a reason to smile and laugh even in the face of danger. The show is also very funny. The stupidity of certain characters will have you in stitches. The story arcs are very intriguing and surprising too. People say that One Piece is a show for children, but isn't most shown in anime. One Piece happens to have very dark storylines and brutal characters that will affect the story and the feel of the show. There are a lot of adult themes that younger people couldn't possibly comprehend. I happened to see on a website that someone compared One Piece to Fairy Tail and said that Fairy Tail was for more mature audiences. Now, I've watched Fairy Tail up until about episode 30, and I have to say so far that there is nothing that makes the show any more mature than One Piece. And at this point, I feel that One Piece is more adult due to the level of violence and stories of the characters involved. The filler arcs and TV specials of One Piece are also pretty good, and a lot better than most other shows that have filler material that are pretty bad and low in quality. Now, One Piece from a visual standpoint happens to be one of the most unique anime out there. One could say that One Piece happens to have a very abstract look when you compare it to other anime are present in the same genre or any genre. Some people have even put off One Piece purely because of the look of the show, and while it's not as detailed as other anime, say as Bleach or Naruto, which have highly detailed characters in terms of their facial features, hair and clothing, but One Piece's characters are very simple in composition, are not very detailed, and look kind of wacky and funky when compared to other shows. However, I feel the look of the show is interesting and unique, and it is one of the unique selling points of the show, and if you give it time, just like Dragon Ball Z, the look of the show will change and evolve from the start of the show to the current episodes. I would also like to call One Piece an evolution anime, a term that I happen to use on an anime that has changed and progressed since its original conception and become noticeably different. Now, this can apply to many shonen shows, but I apply this mainly to anime shows that have changed from a visual standpoint. As I mentioned before, Dragon Ball Z happens to be an anime that looked noticeably different from the start of the series to when the series ended. And while the main design of the characters are the same in One Piece, viewers of One Piece will notice the subtle variations in the level of detail in the characters as time goes on. And when you look at the characters from when they first started in the East Blue saga and compare it to the Skypiea saga, there is a noticeable difference in the amount of detail in the art design and animation. And thanks to the animation directors, the show will always stay varied in terms of its look. I believe that One Piece is a definition of what shonen-based anime shows are all about. Now, One Piece is a shonen by genre, which normally means that one is dealing with action/adventure-based cartoons. The codes and conventions found in this show are similar to ones found in other shows like Dragon Ball, Naruto, Bleach, and Fairy Tail, and others. You have the main protagonist, who is a man, accompanied by other main characters who are either friends, allies, or enemies. The main protagonists are normally in a group or crew of some kind, traveling from place to place of varying look and feel, coming across different obstacles and overcoming them through meeting their problems head-on and fighting their way to victory. And obviously, as the journey continues, the obstacles that they come up against are harder to triumph over. Now, as you can tell, I'm a major supporter of One Piece, and I really would recommend it to anyone that wants to experience a different side to the way in which anime looks and feels. So yeah, this is my AMA audition. Hopefully you found it informative, and hopefully you'll be hearing from me soon. This has been the Hypersonic 55. Until then, this is me signing out.